Alright. Welcome everyone to another episode of Dice and Brushes. Today we'll be starting what will hopefully become a new series for the channel for 10th edition tactics videos, where we will be going over some of our favorite units, and we'll be doing so from a semi-competitive mindset. After all, we are not professional tournament goers. We just do it mostly for fun, and we like to get the most out of the units that we love. Today, we'll be going over the Incursors squad, a unit that demonstrates just how effective Recon by Fire really is, and will make your enemy hate an 85-point unit. And just some quick basic lore about them. The Incursors are part of the 10th company of various Space Marine chapters. So a little bit after somebody is elevated to a scout, after they're a scout, they'll then become something like an incursor, eliminator, infiltrator, etc. And chapters like the Raven Guard and their successors are very particular about fielding a few more of these than their brother chapters. Right. Then the Incursor squad itself in game, going over their datasheet real quick. Their profile is pretty basic for a Space Marine. 6-inch movement, toughness 4, 3 up armor save, 2 wounds, leadership 6+, which is pretty good for this game right now, and an objective control of 1 per model. Now, of course, everybody does have a bolt pistol, so do not forget about that when the time comes. But part of what they're special with is the Oculus Bolt Carbine. This has the assault and ignores cover keywords. They have a 24-inch range with 2 attacks, ballistic skill 3 up, strength 4, AP 0, and damage 1. Now we'll get back to the Oculus Bolt Carbine here in a little bit. For their melee weapons, they are all equipped with paired combat blades, which have the sustained hits 1 keyword. This is 3 attacks per model, hitting on 3s, strength 4, AP 0, 1 damage. And 1 Incursor in the entire squad may be equipped with a Haywire Mine, of which you start with 5, and you can go up to 10. Now for their abilities, they have the Scouts keyword with 6 inches, so right before the game starts, you can do nice 6-inch movement. It really helps with deployment shenanigans, so if your opponent goes first, you can use that to get in some cover. Or if you go first, you can use that to get into a more aggressive lines of fire. They, of course, have the Oath of Moment keyword, and this is where we really get in the nitty-gritty of the Incursors. They have the multi-spectrum array. Basically, if you hit an enemy with your Oculus Bolt Carbine, it's marked, and then all friendly Space Marines get +1 to hit in the shooting phase, the following shooting phase, I should say, to be specific. Now, I did mention that they have a Haywire Mine. This is probably one of the reasons why I find the Incursors so fun to use. Once per battle at the start of any phase, so it can be the phase of end of your movement phase, at the start of your enemy's fight phase, it does not matter. You can select 1 enemy unit within 3 inches of the bearer, so the enemy unit can be in close combat with another unit right in front of this squad. Roll a d6. On a 2-up, they suffer d3 mortal wounds. If they are a vehicle, they suffer 2d3 mortal wounds instead. And this is glorious, especially if you are taking the Vanguard detachment, which we will touch on later. And when I told Pat that I was going to get a 3rd unit of Incursors, since I loved their Haywire bombs so much, and I was telling about the Vanguard Spearhead, he told me, Also, everything is bombs. If an enemy touches you, you turn into a bomb. When the enemy goes home and kisses his wife, she's a bomb. And that I'm keeping that quote because with the sheer amount of bombs that the Incursors one had in the last actual codex supplement, it was more, not as much as we have now, but still having haywire mines plus a deadly prize is a lot of mortal wounds for somebody to fight off. And it is just brilliant to see the look on people's faces when they realize they've walked into a trap. Now, remember, for 85 points or 170, I believe it is, for 10? Yes, 170. I want you to remember to use that Oculus Bolt Carbine and that Multi-Spectrum Array. Now, you can only use it once per phase per unit, but if you have multiple Incursor squads, you can have each Incursor provide that +1 to hit against multiple enemy targets. If you want, you can also use these to help support your indirect fire units like your Whirlwinds or your Desolation squads in order to counter that pesky -1 to hit for firing out of line of sight. More on that later with some other stuff, but first, we're going to talk about the squad and various benefits with the detachments. So unfortunately, there's only really two standout uh, detachments for the Incursors. The first one is the Anvil Siege Force. Now, the Anvil Siege Force, ranged weapons equipped by Adeptus Astartes models in your army, get the heavy keyword, including Oculus Bolt Carbines. If such a weapon already has the heavy keyword, then each time an attack is made with that weapon, if the attacking model remains stationary this turn, add 1 to the wound roll. So this is going to help us get that multi-spectrum array off. So you have the Incursors stay still, which they very well could be with their 6-inch scout move. You can use that to get into position and then either have the enemy get into your line of sight and range, or if you have first turn, use that scout move to get within range and line of sight of an enemy unit. It requires a little bit more aggressive deployment, but with their scout move, that doesn't matter as much and becomes a lot more forgiving. So with the heavy keyword staying still, you'll get +1 to hit on your rolls, meaning that you'll now hit on a 2-up, and that multi-spectrum array will trigger. So now your heavy weapons can can still move and get that +1 to hit. So you can be a little bit more mobile. And with things like what are they, the heavy intercessors or the desolation squads, though they are strong units, but again, their weakness, and especially the weakness of the Anvil Siege Force, is their lack of movement. Just because, again, that heavy keyword kind of forces you to stand still. Now, you will be giving up the +1 to wound if you have to move, but you will still be more accurate. And you can think of the +1 to wound for remaining stationary with heavy weapons as more of a bonus, especially since this game you have, right, with the state of the secondary objectives, you have to be relatively mobile. And so Incursors in the Anvil Siege Force will help you do just that. So I'd recommend at least one unit in your Anvil Siege Force, but I wouldn't recommend a whole lot. As for strats, the one stratagem from the Anvil Siege Force that I'd like to talk about is Hail of Vengeance. So in your opponent's shooting phase, just after an enemy unit has resolved its attacks, target one Adeptus Astartes unit from your army that had one or more models destroyed as a result. All right, so did you lose an Incursor or two? Okay. You can then shoot as if it were your shooting phase, but must target that enemy unit when doing so, and can only do so if that enemy unit is an eligible target, i.e. within line of sight and within range. Now, this won't matter so much uh, for the Incursors themselves, but if you have an Invictor Warsuit, you can use its Vanguard support ability to fire back with uh, that Invictor Warsuit as well. That way, your opponent gets shot not just once, possibly twice, in their own shooting phase. Now, you can also combine this with Overwatch from another unit. So another unit maybe will provide Overwatch in the enemy's movement phase. Then the Incursors take damage in the enemy's shooting phase. They use Hail of Vengeance. And keep in mind, with Hail of Vengeance, those attacks are made as if it were your shooting phase. As if it were your shooting phase does have support with the multi-spectrum array, because in your shooting phase is the first line in the multi-spectrum array. So shoot them in their own shooting phase with the Incursors. That triggers multi-spectrum array. And then use the multi-spectrum array with that Vanguard support ability from the Invictor Warsuit in order to shoot back again in the enemy shooting phase. Right, so if you're taking the Anvil Siege Force, don't pass up the Incursors, especially if you are taking an Invictor Warsuit. Just try it out. Just at least, like I said, just one Incursor squad, maybe at least just one Invictor Warsuit to kind of babysit them to help with this combo, so that it's essentially uh, 2 CP to fire at an enemy unit twice in their own shooting phase. Take that where you can get it. And the next detachment I'd like to go over with the Incursors is the benefits they get from the Vanguard Spearhead. If you're running a lot of Phobos, this is where you're running them. Vanguard Detachment, you gain benefits of cover, and you are -1 to be hit when shot from over 12 inches away. And almost all of these stratagems within the Vanguard Spearhead are fantastic to use with these guys. First off, a deadly prize. Basically, you plant a D3 Mortal Wounds bomb on an objective and you make it sticky. On top of that, this can compound with the Haywire Mine War Gear ability, so that you get one of my favorite combos in the game just because it's so fun. Incursors with the Haywire Bombs, a deadly prize. Enemy moves on to the objective to either try to take the objective away from you with OC or to assault the Incursors. And now they're looking at either 2d3 mortal wounds, in essence, or if they're a vehicle unit, they're in essence looking at 3d3 mortal wounds. I just love that combo. Now, I did use it against the Imperial Knights, Pat's Imperial Knights to be specific, and it did some serious damage to one of his knights, and the Incursors just, for some reason, couldn't die in that combat. And more recently in the Custodes game, Custodes assaulted some infiltrators that were literally right in front of the Incursors. Because of the wording on the Haywire Mine, at the start of the fight phase, I set off the Incursors' Haywire Mine, even though they weren't locked in combat. It's at the start of any phase against an enemy unit within 3 inches, and the Custodes took 2 mortal wounds. So they can punch above their weight if you use them correctly. Next up, of course, we got Surgical Strikes. With this stratagem, it's 2 CP to give your melee weapons precision. It's an option, but it's not going to be a strong option for paired combat blades. Next up, we have Strike from the Shadows. Basically, if an enemy is over 12 inches away, you gain +1 to ballistic skill, extra AP -1. If the enemy takes a casualty, you can cause a battle shock test. Now, if you really need to get the Incursors multi-spectrum array ability off, this is absolutely fantastic. If you just need that extra AP, not too bad, but there are better options to use this on if that's what you're looking for. I wouldn't rely on the battle shock test, but as for the rest of it, it's not too bad. If you're mainly using it for the ballistic skill and AP modifiers, 1 CP is not a bad investment to get that multi-spectrum array off. And I don't think I mentioned this before, but with Oath of Moment, it is pick a target enemy unit on the board, and all Adeptus Astartes reroll to hit rolls for it. So having +1 to hit against the target that you also get rerolls, it does not greatly improve your chances, but it does still improve your chances to eliminate that one enemy unit that just needs to die. And then we have Calculated Feint. So this one is, let's see here. Calculated Feint is 1 CP as well. When you select this unit as a charge, Phobos, or when you select, when any Adeptus Astartes infantry is selected as target of a charge, you can make a normal move up to D6 inches, or in Phobos and Scout case, it's just an automatic 6 inches. So if you want, you can use this stratagem to make these kind of a feint. So bait the enemy charge, move back, make sure that the enemy is out of position so that they either A, fail that charge, or B, they're not able to charge that unit, if any unit anymore. And it will really help you dictate the flow of battle once you use this. Next up, we have Guerrilla Tactics. This is the last stratagem that I want to go over. In essence, up to 2 Phobos units can be placed into strategic reserves at the end of any enemy fight phase. But they do have to be at least 3 inches away, aka not in engagement range. This is quite nice, as it can be used to help position the Incursors to help with your indirect fire units. So enemy fight phase, you pop this one off for 1 CP. So maybe your Incursors aren't in a good position, like they're in the back of the board not doing anything. Maybe they've already placed a deadly prize on it. Use this to get it around the sides of the board, because later on, you can use strategic reserves to come on from other board edges from other than your own. So give them line of sight to something that's really hurting you in the enemy's backfield, or maybe just to take pot shots at the enemy unit, the weaker enemy unit in their back line that's just sitting on objective, like Gretchen or something like that. And then you can have your indirect fire units actually wipe that unit out to prevent that enemy unit from having that objective anymore. All right, next up we got the Lieutenant in Phobos armor. He gives lethal hits to these very low strength weapons, so you can move, advance. With the assault keyword, you can still fire at an enemy unit. If you hit it, you're going to get that not the Oath of Moment, you're going to get that multi-spectrum array off, and 6s to hit, because the lethal hits will be wounds, so you can get a little bit extra. I wouldn't consider it an auto take by any means, but what you would really take him for is the move, shoot, move D6 ability that can then also be combined with the calculated feint. So the calculated feint is in the charge phase, but to move, get within range, shoot, get that multi-spectrum ability off, then move D6 again. I wouldn't rely on it. Being 6 inches, I would only rely on it at best being 2 or 3. For yourself, if your enemy is using this, I would always say that they're going to roll a 5 or a 6. Plan on that. But there are a lot of fast assault units in 40k right now with the smaller board size. So we do have to consider that, again, that calculated feint, which would be for Incursors automatic 6, to then get out of charge range if you really need them alive. Now, of course, that maybe you've already used your Haywire Mine, or maybe it's just not that charging unit is not the best. It's not the best target for that Haywire Mine, and you want to try to save it for later if you can. So this is definitely an option. And for the last character we're going to go over is the Librarian in Phobos Armor. He is kind of nice because he gives the 4-up Feel No Pain against psychic attacks, which, yeah, it's not going to be common depending on for most armies that you fight, but it is something that is nice to have. If you're fighting Thousand Sons, Grey Knights, you're going to use it far more often. Tyranids, you might use it against Eldar, maybe, but not as much as it used to. But that's not what we're relying on. For 70 points, the Librarian Phobos Armor, we're taking his Shrouding ability, which is basically lone operative for whatever unit he is attached to. So, we can make them untargetable outside of 12 inches while using our multi-spectrum ray to boost the damage of our other units. Because let's face it, who's going to dedicate close combat resources to a single bolter unit like the Incursors? Really, if they get close enough, I doubt it's going to be a shooting unit that's going to get within that 12 inches. So I really don't think anyone's going to be spending those points. On top of that, with Shrouding, you also gain the stealth keyword, so -1 to be hit with ranged attacks. So again, you're really not going to send a shooting unit after these guys. So putting the Librarian Phobos to give them the lone op is not a terrible idea at all. And there we have it. All of those reasons are why I think that almost every single Space Marine list should have at least one unit of Incursors. They're tactically flexible, they help boost the damage output of your army, especially if you have indirect fire. If somebody charges them, they're going to pay a price. And they're only 85 points for 5 to boot. If you want us to do more tactics videos like this, or you have some critique, please let us know in the comments below. We're trying new things out here. And as always, like, share, subscribe to Dice and Brushes. And as we always say, get your shit painted.